Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Good Grief. My name is Dr. Christine Malone, and in this podcast, we talk about trauma, tragedy, and survival. In each episode, I will interview someone that has gone through grief in some way, and we will discuss the impact it has had on their life. By sharing these stories, we hope that others won't feel alone should they be going through similar situations. Enjoy. Okay, so listeners, thanks so much for joining us today. My guest is going to tell us her story about a loss in her life and what she's done with that. So if you would like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Reed. I'm 35. I think that's important. I don't know why I have to add my age in there. I am a married mother of currently I have 5 children in my home. And I am talking to you today because I lost my second daughter, Blake, to a genetic disease called spinal muscular atrophy in 2016. I am a foster parent. I'm a foster parent mentor. I'm also a victim advocate for adults and kids who come into the emergency department who have been sexually or physically assaulted.
That's quite a bit. I
Well,
have heard of spinal muscular atrophy. Do you watch the YouTube channel of Squirmy and Grubs?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
shame.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
One of my favorite ones to watch.
yeah.
So your daughter, did you know she had this condition before she was born, or if not, when did you find out?
No. So my oldest daughter was born, and then when she was about, gosh, maybe 6 months old, 7 months old, I found out I was pregnant. It was a big surprise with my second daughter. And for whatever reason, during that pregnancy, I just felt like something was not right, something was off. But I was told over and over again that everything was fine. Um, she was born, and I mean, she was perfect and all the things, but I still just couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right. And it was about, she was probably 2 months old when I really was like, okay, something is wrong. Like she's having what we know now is like muscle strength issues. She couldn't really hold up her head. It wasn't like an all over type thing where it was like, okay, something is clearly off. Like she could do other things, but I remember mentioning to my pediatrician at 2 months old, like she seems to struggle, and she said, no, 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 like she just needs more time, do tummy time. And finally at 4 months old, it was very, very apparent that she was not okay. And so we had been kind of trying to get answers as to what was going on, and we didn't get her diagnosis until she was 6 months old. And so spinal muscular atrophy, I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard of it. It is a neuromuscular disorder disease that affects your ability to do everything. So walk, talk, eat, swallow, breathe. You need your muscles to do everything. And there are 4 different types of it. And she had the most severe type, which is what most people have. She had type 1. And so back in 2016. So she was born in 2015, and then she wasn't diagnosed until 2016. The life expectancy with no treatment and no cure is, I mean, basically we were told she wouldn't live past, definitely she would not live past 2, but the likelihood of her living past 1 was also very, very low.
What does it take to diagnose that disease? I mean, why did it take them so
So
long?
it's a genetic disease, and you each have to be a carrier of it. So had I been tested before I was pregnant or in pregnancy, and seen that I was a carrier for it. So people get all tripped up with this, and I do too, because genetics are confusing. But we think of other more commonly known diseases like cystic fibrosis. And so if I carry cystic fibrosis, and so does my husband. So it's like that. SMA, you have a 1 in 4 chance of giving it to your child. So we had no idea that I was a carrier. And it's a blood test. Like it's just a simple blood screen that you can do before you decide to have kids or when you're pregnant. And so once she was born, it was a simple blood test just to see. But I think that the people that we saw before that 6 month mark didn't want to. I mean, honestly, I felt a lot of them, they haven't seen SMA, even though it is a lot more prevalent than what, you know, there still are a lot of people that haven't seen it, and no one wants to be the one to tell you like, hey, your child is going to die. So I had to push, and even we saw a specialist probably at 4 months, and she told me like, I'm hopeful for her. I think, I think she'll be okay. We just don't know what this is. And so they did do a genetic testing at that time, but it didn't include SMA. And so it wasn't until we saw a neuromuscular doctor that he had seen it in clinic, and he said, this is what we're dealing with. And that was before we had like the blood test evidence, but I knew before that.
Had you or your husband had anyone else in your family, relatives that ever had this condition?
No. And it is like, it's one of those things that like, it doesn't discriminate on any, it's not more common in a certain race or anything like that. And oddly enough, we don't really share this piece of it very much, but when my husband was tested, he on paper does not carry it, but there's a tricky little thing where it can kind of trick the test. So he likely does carry it because the idea of it being just like, they call it, what do they call it? De novo, like just a random, is so low. He probably does carry it. So had we known, like had I been tested before pregnancy and then him being tested, we still would have moved forward in the way that we did because we had no idea that he actually, they call it being a silent carrier, but that doesn't happen very often. I don't remember what your question was, and I just started talking about something else.
Whether anyone you had any relatives, whether there's any other
So
relatives?
no relatives, no, nothing. And I had never even heard of it before then.
Yeah, no, I hadn't either until I started following the blog that I told you, or
Yeah.
the vlog, I guess you call it.
Yep.
So you said there's no treatment, no cure. So was there anything the docs could do for her during her life, or was it just a progression of her just getting worse?
So they no treatment, no cure. It was kind of, I don't know if I'd say controversial, but like decisions needed to be made at that time. Are we going to do things to prolong her life, knowing that she's never going to be able to, she's never going to get better. It's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder. There are families that choose interventions like a G tube, and so it's not safe to eat by mouth, and so you get a G tube and you get assistance with breathing, whether that be like a BiPAP that goes over your nose. Some kids eventually get trachs and things like that, or somewhere in the middle of that, or do you do nothing and no intervention in that sense? And we chose to not intervene because we felt like one way that people describe SMA to me, type 1 especially, is it's like ALS but in babies. So she was never going to be able to successfully eat. She was never going to be, safely. She was never going to be able to breathe. It was never going to get easier for her. And so we wanted to spend the time that we had with her away from doctors and hospitals and anything medical like that. And so we chose to do just palliative care for her.
We have that in common. My son,
Yeah.
who passed away at the age of 4, he was disabled since birth, and my husband and I chose that same path because we just wanted him to be comfortable. We knew we couldn't fix him,
Yeah.
and had a wonderful, wonderful pediatrician who helped us see that the more we treated him, the longer we were having him suffer, and that was eye-opening for me, for
Yeah.
sure. It was very eye-opening. So, your daughter passed away at 11 months, is that right?
10 months, 3 weeks. We say 11 months. Yeah.
7 months, yeah. So how has that experience impacted you? What's changed about you? And you didn't even know what this diagnosis was, and then you've got this diagnosis for your daughter, and it's not good. And nearly 11 months later, she's not here in person anymore. So how has that impacted you?
You said what's changed, and I would say everything. Everything has changed. I might cry. Everything has changed in every way. So I would say that there's so many things that we do now, that I do, as a mom, as a person, everything that I never would have done had she not been here. I try to, like, I don't even know. I try to live completely differently than I did before. I was a very, I don't know. I try to be more like in the moment with everything, with my children, with my husband, with just my life, very intentional about being here and being grateful to be alive and being able to do all the things. So now I don't just do them for me, I also do them for her. One of the, I mean, some of the bigger things, we do a lot of talking to people about SMA and raising funds for SMA and stuff like that. We decided, gosh, how maybe a year, 2 years after she died, we started fostering. And I remember like seeing something about kids who needed homes, and like I say, like old Stephanie. So always the before Blake would have been like, I care about those kids, but I can't do it. And then now Blake's mom is like, yes, I can, and I will, and I'm going to. And so we started doing that. We've adopted one of our daughters from foster care. I tried to go through school before. I just finished, actually, I finally got my bachelor's degree last year. I never would have done that without her. I don't even know. I mean, I don't even know how to explain that. It's everything that we do is because of her. And it's definitely, I mean, the whole perspective changes, right? Like when you see how precious life is, and I don't want to waste it.
Yeah, I know, and I know you're going to be able to relate to this. When a parent says to me, oh, it's so bad, my child has allergies, or one of my friends, her child had a hip dysplasia, so she required this, like a harness that she had to wear for the first 3 or 4 months of her life, and she was going to
Mhm.
be perfectly fine. And I always say to my students, don't ever compare your worst to someone else's worst, because I sit and I listen to someone tell me about their baby with, spitting up a lot or whatever. I'm thinking,
Yeah,
wow, your baby can
yeah,
eat. I mean, to me, it's just
yeah.
like
No,
always in my head. But I do know that I certainly learned that I can do anything, and I'm
mhm.
getting that from you too. Really, there's nothing you
Yeah.
can't do. I survived this. I can do this. So, how about your relationship with your husband? Has that changed with all this? I mean, I'm certain it has, but have you? Because I know when parents are grieving, you don't grieve the same way, and
Mhm.
it's hard to really have those conversations and so on. The
Yeah.
divorce rate for parents who've lost a child is pretty high.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I can totally understand why.
So, so you know what? It's a struggle. Like it has been a struggle. We've been married for, in May it will be 12 years. We've been together for 13 years. We've been through a deployment. We've been through a lot of, not my deployment. Well, I mean, his deployment, but, I, we started as soon as, I started therapy when I was worried about her. I remember like, I gotta go. I don't know, and everyone's kind of like bustling around, like, it's gonna be fine. And then, so I started therapy. And then as soon as she was diagnosed, we started therapy together. And that was the only time we left Blake, was an hour a week to go to therapy. And we've continued kind of on and off through the years, but it has been, I mean, one of the hardest things that has come after, because it's hard to be married as it is. It's hard to be married with young kids, anyway. And we are not the same person. We are very, very different. And so I actually had, my mom the other day, love her, she said, you guys are lucky, like there's so many people who lose children. And I was like, Mom, we're working our asses off here. Like it's a constant, intentional, and we're not good at it sometimes, and sometimes it gets kind of pushed aside. But I mean, it's really struggled our marriage itself in so many ways. Like there are things as small as, like, I have a tough time leaving my kids. I don't really trust people, um as much as and we need to leave and we need to get away, and I mean, something as simple as that, but it affects a lot, right? Like you need to have time as married people, not just as parents or whatever else. um yeah, and the individual journey is so different too, like you said. I mean, you don't grieve the same way. And so we struggle a lot with, I want to talk about this, or I want to do this and I don't, or I want to go here and I don't. Or luckily he's been willing to, I mean, all the therapy on and off, because I know that I mean, I've heard from other friends, like their husbands just won't go, and that just will not do, if you want to stay married to me. But yeah, it sucked. It has sucked.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I want to congratulate you guys for doing the therapy. My now ex-husband didn't want to do therapy. And
Yeah.
we struggled for a long time after my son died and grew apart in ways that it's hard to explain, and did eventually end the marriage. Yeah. So your other kids, you already had an older child before Blake
Mhm.
was born. Does that
Yes.
did that child remember Blake at all?
She so she was gosh, what was she was almost 3 when Blake died. And so we did a lot of like I did a ton of like videos and all the things, and she remembers what I, tell her. I sometimes hope that she remembers a little bit of the things that I really tried to get her to remember. But I will say that like I think her body remembers a lot of things and a lot of that time. And yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, I get that. My daughter was 3 when her brother died, and she doesn't remember him in her brain. But I have videos
right,
over the shoulder recently of her when we first brought her home from the hospital, and her brother in his wheelchair, and I'm introducing him to her. And of course, she doesn't remember that. She's a newborn, but she's like, "Oh, that was so
right,
sweet. That made me cry. That was so sweet." And I said, "Yeah, but I just, he was here. He was somebody, and he was
yeah,
part of the family." And
yeah.
yeah, not remembering him is tough. How about like from friends and family? Did you and do you still? I mean, do you feel like you're supported by friends and family? I know a lot of people, when it is a child that's passed, people are very uncomfortable having that
Yeah.
conversation. They don't want to talk to you. They don't know what to say. They feel like, oh, I just won't bring her up because certainly you don't want to talk about her. Where, um, I know for me, I'd love to talk about my son. So it's like it doesn't. I'm
Yeah.
just curious, how has that experience been for you?
It has been one of the I think one of the toughest parts, especially as we went through it when she was still here, and then like in the immediate, I'd say maybe like first year after she died, I was so like distraught over people's reaction, and that reaction being like, I can't be around you. I have my family is has been as supportive as they can be. My family, like my parents and my sister, my brother-in-law, um, and they struggle because they were also going through it, and they still go through it too. I think that a lot of our friends really disappointed, to be very frank, really disappointed me, disappointed my husband in the way that they acted. Some didn't, some were wonderful. I have had some since apologize to me and say, like, I'm just very sorry that I wasn't there. And on the one hand, like looking back now, I mean, we're years away from it, and I get it a little bit more, but back then I didn't. I was so um just I mean, I couldn't even function. And then to feel like I had leprosy, like no one wanted to come around me and catch the fact that my daughter was going to die, right? Like, and that was it was terrible. I mean, it was terrible. Like it was terrible. People that you've known your whole entire life, and they can't even like, I mean, or it's like, let me know if you need anything. Or I had one person that I had known for a really long time, and she came over, and I saw her one time, and then it was like I didn't see her anymore. It was just like it's too. Or I had a friend tell my husband was kind of talking in front of her, and she said, "Please, just don't. I can't. It's too sad. Like you can't talk about it anymore. It's too sad." And so you want to punch people in the face a lot. I mean, we had a lot of that afterwards too. A lot. One thing that was just so hard for me was the complaints, like you said, about other people's kids. Like I mean, it was to the point where we had to. There were people who I couldn't physically be around because I wanted to just lash out, like complaints about having to get a different car because your new baby wasn't going to fit in your old car, and what a burden that was to have to buy a new car. And I don't, and again, like looking back now, I'm like, I don't think that it was intended in the way that it was said, but it's just it sucked. That sucked, you
Yeah.
know.
So
um
actually, one question I want to ask you, and I certainly have several answers to this myself, but I'm curious from your perspective, if you were talking to someone whose friend or family member was going through what you've gone through, what would you advise them to do for their friend
Oh, and
who?
I do that now. People, and I actually kind of like that. I feel like that's another way I can be Blake's mom in trying to assist. And I'm not like an expert, but I mean, I kind of am. Let me just give myself a little bit of credit. I'm a little bit of an expert when it comes to, and I think that just like having someone for me. Having someone who I knew was not going to try to fix me, was not going to act like they were uncomfortable and get all in their feelings about whatever. Someone who could say, like, I am so sorry, this is horrible, and I'm going to sit right here and I'm going to do whatever you want me to do. If that's just listen to you, if that's bring you food, if that's just text you. I mean, I tell my friends, like, text the person every day. Don't expect them to respond, and don't do any, text them every day. I'm thinking about you, and be genuine in that, don't say, how are you? And then not want to know how they are, because they might be horrible. Um, People who can sit with you in the shit, and for a lot of us that shit lasts for months and years and a really long time. um and that, I think my group is pretty small, the people that I feel I can, really be in it. But the advice I would give is to don't try to fix something that's totally unfixable, and let that person do what they need to do, and just be there with them. And
Yeah.
that could be on the phone. That doesn't mean sit right next to them. Maybe it does. Um,
Yeah, I would add to that, taking care of practical things like taking care of the other children. Come clean my house, make some
yep.
food. I remember my younger sister took my older kids to the Puyallup Fair, so they were gone for a whole day, and I didn't have to worry about taking care of them while I was in the midst of my own trying to take care of myself. So
Yeah.
yeah, that I get. I have one extremely good friend who I remember her sitting down with me and saying, "What can I do? What can I do?" Because she was clueless. What do I do? And I just
Yeah.
said the same thing. Just be there. Just be there for me. Just be there and let me talk without, don't feel like I have to say something. Just listen to me even if I'm not talking. Was kind of the phrase that I
Yeah. Yeah.
used. Yeah. So I would like to know also parents who might be going through some of the same things, maybe not with SMA, but with a life-limiting illness. The end is coming. What would you say to them, or what have you said? Because I'm going to guess you've probably talked to parents like this. What do you feel is helpful?
So I would say, as difficult as this is, like, you got to try to just take care of yourself while you're taking care of everything and everyone else. But trying to take care of yourself in the midst of all the terribleness. I would say we took pictures, like, we got family pictures done every month from the month we found out until the month that she died. I would say do everything that you want to do. And the biggest thing I would say is don't worry about other people. Do not worry about how it looks to your neighbor or your mom or it's not about anybody but you and your family, and whatever that looks like. That, I mean, it can look totally different than, but that includes, like, your choices and your where you go and how you do things and all of that. It's about your child and you and your family, and that's really all.
Yeah, that's all that matters. I completely agree with you, and I think
Yeah.
for some, I'll speak for myself, choosing palliative care. I felt like at times people questioned that and wondered if that was the right thing to do. And I thought, well, first of all, you're not in my shoes, so you don't get to choose whether that's the right thing to do. And yeah, my son was beautiful. So to look at him and say, oh, well, this child's life's not going to be very long. That again, don't judge what another parent is doing. It's not your choice, and be thankful that you're not in those shoes because it's a horrible
Right.
speed. So yeah,
Right.
yeah, I remember feeling like I needed to excuse things. I had to make excuses, and
For
I
sure. For sure.
looking back on that now, I'm angry about it. It's like, why did I have to make an excuse to this person for this thing that was really none of their business? It had nothing to do with them to begin with.
Right.
So
We never, I think that me telling you, that's the first time I've ever, like, talked about that decision. I mean, and I've talked about a lot of stuff, like, on my blog years ago and just with people. And the little bit of, like, kind of pushback and from actually other people, other parents in, like, the SMA community, who they chose a different route, and it was extremely hurtful. I mean, to have people say the things that they're saying, and now I realize, but it's not like you said. I think that there are people that have so many opinions, yet you've never been in my shoes, and even when you are, like, you're not me and this isn't your child, so, and it looks totally different. I mean, it's not all these different things. Even though the disease is the same, it looks different from child to child, and regardless, you get to make your decisions about your child. And um Yeah, how dare you judge somebody who's going through the absolute worst thing? I mean, we all agree this is the worst thing, and then you have something to say about what I think is best for my child. I just think that's insane.
And I will also put out there that in my case, people who have children who were as disabled as my son, if they do choose to provide care for them and prolong their lives, that's their choice. And I don't judge that either, right? I mean, I have a friend
Right,
whose son lived to be 18 years old and he was extremely disabled. And but they made care choices that got him to live to 18 years old, and that was their choice. And I respect that from here
right.
to eternity.
That's their child, right? Right? Like
And
they know
their
their
choice,
child.
and no
They
no
know their
judgment.
child.
And I don't get it. I didn't never got any judgment from them either when they knew our choices were different. So is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we end? This has been a wonderful interview. I've enjoyed very much family and all the things you do.
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think I have anything else other than I think it's great that you're doing this for people,
Yeah.
and I hope that I don't know. I hope it helps. It's a tough thing. I think that we don't learning once, getting into this terrible grief world, like it's not talked about enough. There's not enough people who are saying how things really are. And so I think it's great and important to say how they are.
Yeah. Take away the stigma and just say, you know what, this happens to people. And the longer we don't talk about it, the more it is a stigma, right? Whereas if we
Yeah,
can
right.
speak its truth and just say, this is what's going on. There will be other people in our shoes. It's unfortunately these things happen, right? I mean, these diseases
Yeah,
happen, injuries happen, and it happens. So yeah, if I can wave a magic wand, I'd say, oh, all these things are gone. Nobody's going to have these problems ever again. Nobody ever has.
right.
But it's unfortunately not within my power to do so. So
Right.
again, I super appreciate your time and your story. And I would like for you to send to me any links you have. I know you've got I think you said a blog and whatever other resources that you think might be helpful to our listeners when they hear your episode.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Good Grief. To hear more about my personal story, please pick up a copy of the book, The Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival. You can find the book on Amazon and Kindle.